everyone, this is Miguel
and Michelle,
and welcome back. Today we're going to talk about someone historical this time. As you may have seen in our previous videos, it's often a legend or someone completely fictional, but this time it's going to be something very special. And today we're going to talk about Gabriela Silang. So in case you may not know, she is an actual person in history in the Philippines and is known to be a sort of Joan of Arc in Philippine history. And what people may not realize is that sometimes she can be mistaken for mere legend because there's not that much documentation in terms of pictures of her, but we do have an amazing statue of Gabriela Silang made in Makati City, by the way, made by Jose Mendoza. And it is this image, this statue, I would say, in which we're able to see a representation of her at least. It goes to show how important art is in representation. In my version of Gabriela Silang, it was actually not too difficult because again, this is someone historical. Frankly, there's not that much like flashy colors or anything, you know, very, very simple clothing that these people wore back then. So I took the creative liberty to perhaps base it on some fantasy figures. As you know me well, I tend to draw inspiration from anime and pop culture, but at the same time, I wanted to keep it simple. I want the focus to be on the fact that she was a real person and not too much of the fantastical, mythical elements this time. Although I do think it's cool, even on the statue, it's a very majestic image as she is wielding a bolo, which is a sword, the type of sword in the Philippines. And so I wanted to capture that because I think it's quite cool. And I gave her a gun as well, just to add more variety in her weaponry of this person in history. There was a organization that was named after her, known as the Gabriela Society or the Gabriela Party. It's basically a women's party, or a movement rather, that began in the 80s and that was going against Ferdinand Marcos's reign at the time. It didn't become an actual party until 2000s. And what's actually important to note that Southeast Asian women's movement actually started around the same time that the women's suffrage started here, which would be in the 18th century. And so for the Philippines especially, colonialism was a thing everywhere. And in Gabriela Silang's time, Spain was already the dominant empire in the Philippines. But what most people don't know is that Great Britain tried to conquer Philippines as well in around the 1700s. And at that time, Gabriela Silang actually sided with the British, but her long-term plan was to conquer Spain and then also conquer Great Britain as well. So it just goes to show that she may have been a woman of great intelligence, because she did reach a high rank within her own army, guerrilla army at the time. So she was definitely a leader, no doubt, but also had a tremendous vision for the country of the Philippines. And so that to me is why I find her to be very important. And I do think that the Joan of Arc of the Philippines is a well-deserved title. Again, my design is very simple. I didn't add too much, just made the focus of her, just her and her alone, her body and her weapons, and this sense of like fierceness to her. And, that to me is why I think she's very important.
So what I like about how you designed your character, that she does have like a dynamic flow into her posing, or she's kind of moving. Like, I'm not quite sure. It looks like she should be sitting on something, because that's almost like a really odd angle of her body to be like moving with her leg up like that. So that's just like my one critique about this. But I do like how it's dynamic. I like how you display two different types of weapons, and you mentioned earlier the bolo, the type of sword. I was wondering what is the end of that? Like, what is the handle supposed to represent?
So that is actually something very traditional that I took inspiration from existing weapons, and I'm not sure if that's like the exact type of bolo that she used at the time, but it's definitely a bolo. And the gun that I gave her, I forgot what exact type of gun, but that's basically a colonial type of handgun at the time. It's just a basic sort of reference that I added. If I decided to give myself more time, I would have added more ornate detail. But again, the focus should be around her using the weapon rather than the weapon themselves. So this was the best thing I can come up with. But I do think it's kind of slightly weird that she'd be floating, because that used to be a bad habit of mine when designing characters.
It does lend itself to be sort of fantastical. Like you're somebody who's used to doing fantasy type character design, so honestly, it could fit into a world of a fantasy. No, actually, I think you have that gracefulness, and I think the way you draw her dress really adds to that gracefulness. Like it's very, you could kind of tell it's like silky. I guess another critique for me when you're depicting that, it's like she may come from wealth, but I don't know, a white dress could mean anything. So it's very simple, so maybe that can make it seem like she comes from a humble background, but
yeah, I could have given her like a two-piece clothing and have some parts ripped to show that she was in battle.
For me as a woman, I like that she literally looks like a woman, so not that she always has to be.
Yeah.
And I think it kind of does go against a little bit of the Joan of Arc thing that you mentioned, because she's not necessarily concealing herself as a woman. She is.
Oh, right.
Yeah.
True,
Or I don't know. Like I didn't get that far into history. I really do like your design. It places her in some sort of time period.
So I think around this point, as I was designing characters, I was beginning to pay more closer attention to get even better references. But let me know in the comments below what you think. And of course, do you think you can fight her, even though she's passed away by now? But
And also, if you'd like to learn more about Gabriela Silang, Miguel did a portrait of her, or at least a depiction of what he thought she would look like, and it's made in pastel. We'll link the video up somewhere, and I think it's really cool. So
alright, as usual, thank you for stopping by, and look forward to the next video.
okay, we'll see you around. Bye!